Section 6.2, factoring trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. This section focuses specifically on trinomials that have an e, they're also known as quadratic trinomials, that have a first term, this a, is equal to a 1. So the steps for this are we need to order our trinomials in descending order of one variable. If you look at number 1 or example 1, it is already ordered in descending order of one variable. The x squared, and the next term is 11x, and then there is just the constant 24. The step 2 is to factor out the greatest common factor. Now there is no greatest common factor, so we don't have to take anything out, factor anything out. Okay, so I'm going to create my answer area, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the factor pair of 24, but specifically the factor pair that sums to b, which is an 11. So the factor pair of c, which is 24, that adds up to 11. Now when I look at factor pair, it's just a set of numbers that would multiply to 24. And so I'm listing out the different factor pairs for 24. There actually are a lot of them. All right, and but we need them to add up to 11. So you'll see when I compare the factor pairs that add up to 11, we get the 3 and the 8. Now for this type, when the leading coefficient is a 1, it's actually that simple. And we can just put in x plus 3 and then x plus 8. And that would be our final answer. Let's look at example number 2. With number 2, it is in descending order, the z squared term, and then to the right is the z term, and then to the right of that is the constant. I'm going to write my answer area. All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the factor pair of c, which is negative 18, that sums, so it adds up to our b, which is a negative 7. All right, so I need a negative factor. So it's a negative factor, or the factors of a negative product, that negative 18. So it's one's going to be positive and one is negative. And I want to look at this. When I have 1 and negative 18, I get negative 17. Now if I change their signs and say negative 1 and 18, I go positive 17. So by changing the signs on the factors, I change the sign on the sum. Now this can be a big time saver, because if I look at 2 and negative, let's do a negative 2 and a positive 9, I get 7. Now that's close to what I need. I need a negative 7. It has to equal that b term, right? I need a negative. I have a positive. So what that means for me is I'm simply going to change the sign. So instead of a negative 2, I put a positive 2 down. Instead of the positive 9, I have a negative 9. And there is my, add them together, I get a negative 7. Awesome. Here are my values. So I'm going to have z plus 2, z minus 9. That will be my final answer. Let's take a look at number 3. 3w squared plus w minus 12. Okay, well, it's in descending order of the w term, and then, or the w squared term, and then the w term, and then the minus 12. So I'm going to create my, and there is no common factor, so I'm going to create my answer area. Now I'm going to look for the factor pair of c, that last term, which is a negative 12, that sums to b, which is a 1. That's the coefficient on a plain w is a 1. So I could look at, 1 and negative 12. Okay, that gives me a negative 11. And if I change to a negative 1 and a positive 12, I get positive 11. So that's not going to help. I can look at 2 and negative 6. which when I add them, I get a -4. And if I did a -2 and a +6, I get a positive. So that's not going to help. 3 and a -4 gives me, their sum gives me a -1. That's close. I don't need a -1. I need a +1. So I'm going to change the 3 to a -3, the -4 to a +4, and their sum will be a +1. These are my values. So the answer is W minus 3, W plus 4. Now, how you would check this is just to FOIL it, okay? And I'm going to move this down. We're just going to FOIL it right to the top here. So if I FOILed W minus 3 times W plus 4, I would go first, outer, inner, and then last. And when I simplify it, this middle term, I get a 1. And that would be, it definitely does check. Okay, so this is my answer right here. All right, so let's take a look at number 4. 4x, or it's just x squared plus 4x plus 45. Okay, well here, it is in descending order. I cannot take a greatest common factor out. So here's my answer area. So I look for the factor pairs of 45 that add up to a 4. All right, well, with 45, the factor pairs are 45 and 1, 3 and 15. Here, the sum is 46, 3 and 15, the sum is 18. Those are all of the factor pairs of 45. So you can't factor this. And so what we call it is we call it prime. So when you cannot factor something, which includes you can't even take out a greatest common factor, we write prime. All right, so factor. Let's look at number 1. First thing we need to do is we have to write this in descending order. So h squared plus 2h minus 8. There are no common factors other than 1. So I'm going to write my answer area. All right, so I'm going to look for the factor pairs of -8. It's my factors that sum to a +2. All right, well, for a -8, 1 and -8, that gives me -7. All right, it's not even close. 2 and a -4 gives me a -2. So that is close. So I'm going to change the negative or the 2 to a -2, 4 to a +4, and then -2 would end up being positive. So my answer is h plus 4, h minus 2. And that would be my final answer. Going on to number 2. All right, we have 2 different variables. Now, when I look at this, it is in descending order of p, because I start with my p squared term, I then go to my p term, and then there's no p's. All right, so this is in descending order of the variable p. All right, so that's done. There is no greatest common factor. All right, well, I can't factor anything out then. So what I'm going to do to help me with this, because the 2 variables can seem kind of confusing. So I'm going to make my answer area. Since the first term is a p squared, I know there's going to be a p in each of the first terms. Now the last term is it has a q squared, so I know there's going to be a q in each of the last terms. So what I'm going to do now is just to work with the coefficients to decide what goes in the middle of each. What are my coefficients? So I'm going to look at the factors of -21, my c, that sum to a +4, my b. All right, now when I do this, I actually see it. All right, I see that 7 times a -3 gives me a -21 product, but it gives me a sum of a 4. And what I will do is I will write +7 minus 3 to finish my factorization. And number 3 is similar. We have 2 variables with number 3 as well. So let's take a look, and it is in descending order of M. There are no greatest common factors. So I'm going to get my answer area ready. And then I'm going to look at the numbers. So my factors, now again, this is all because that lead coefficient is a 1. It's a plain M squared. The factors of C, which is a negative 42, that sum to, well, B is equal to a 1. It's the coefficient on that middle term. All right. So we can look at the different factor pairs. 1 and negative 42, not even close. 2 and negative 21, not even close. 3 and negative 14, not even close. It's getting closer though. How about 6 and negative 7? Gives me a negative 1. Okay, that's close. I need a 1. I got a negative 1. So I'm just going to change the signs. And I get a negative 6 and a positive 7. And this would be my answer. The quantity m minus 6n times the quantity m plus 7n. All right, let's look at number 4. All right, it is in descending order. There's no greatest common factor. Put my answer area. All right, I need the factor pair of C, which is a negative 38, that sums to B, which is a 2. All right, well, with negative 38, I can negative 38 and 1, negative 37, negative 19 and 2, which is a negative 17. And, I could look at, changing these signs, and it just changes the value from negative to positive. So with this one, there is no factorization, and we would say that it is prime. So we need to write prime. There's nothing else to really write here, okay? But I have to write prime. I have to circle prime because you cannot factor it. You cannot even take out a greatest common factor. Number 5. Right, now we need to list this in descending order. So it'd be negative 3z cubed minus 12z squared plus 15z. Step 2 is to take out the greatest common factor, and I will also take out the negative to make that first term positive. So the greatest common factor will be negative 3z, and what will be left is z squared from the first term plus 4z from the second term and plus 5, I'm sorry, negative 5, let me erase that, minus 5 from the third term. When you take out that negative, every sign inside the polynomial will have changed. All right, so now we're going to prepare our answer area. And I do this because I get concerned that I'm going to forget that negative 3z is part of the answer. And it should always be part of the answer. So then I'm going to take a look. Remember, I'm focusing in here to factor. That's what I'm going to focus on. So I want to look at the factors of negative 5 that add up to a positive 4. Well, negative 5 only has 2 factors. It's 1 and negative 5 and negative 1 and 5. And to get a positive 4, it's going to be negative 1 and 5. So I'll put in z minus 1, z plus 4, and that will be my final answer.